Hello, photographer family. I hope that you and your families are healthy, sane, and haven't killed anyone you're sheltering in place with just yet. And most importantly, staying positive during this crazy pandemic. If there's anything that I can do to help you during this time, please reach out. Um, Many of you already know this, but Congress passed the CARE Act, um, the the CARE Act bill just a few short days ago. The document is like 800 or 900 pages long, which is complete insanity, and we're all trying to make sense of it. So I contacted Andrew Jordan from Big Picture CPA to talk us through it. Andrew, welcome. Can you do me a favor and take just a second and tell us what your accounting firm specializes in?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So, Big Picture CPA is a brand we started to help photographers with accounting and tax work. So that is absolutely our specialty. We've been doing it for a few years now, and we love photographers. Love working in the space.
That's awesome. Okay, so without further ado, let's hop right into this. Can you start by giving us a general overview of the CARES Act?
Yeah, and I'll say this. Let me give you a general overview of the part that we see matters to photographers, right? Because as you said, the whole thing is just so big.
Mm-hmm.
But the things that we're really excited about for our photography clients, the first one is the expansion of unemployment, both dollar amount and to self-employed people. That's huge. But then the other two things, there's something called a PPP loan and something called an EIDL loan. And we'll talk about what those mean in a little bit. But those are kind of the three things. And there is some like mutual exclusivity to them. You can't do all three of them. But those are the three that we think are really big for photographers right now.
Okay. Can you what? So there are essentially how many buckets to this program?
Yeah, good. I mean, the ones we want to talk about, I'm going to say there's three: unemployment, PPP, EIDL.
Okay. Um, and then can you explain, go into detail a little bit? You said which one applies to photographers primarily?
Yeah, actually, those are the three of the mini programs in the bill that all three of those could apply to photographers.
Okay. Are photographers allowed to apply for all three?
Yeah, so you're only allowed to apply, like in some cases, like if you get the PPP loan, which is the Paycheck Protection Program loan, that's what you hear in the news called the forgivable loan. Well, the part that's forgiven is the amount that you spend on payroll and a couple other things. So if you're drawing unemployment, you're not also paying payroll, so like it's not going to benefit you much. So there's a lot of things like that. No one's going to try and get all three of them. It's really what we're encouraging people find the one that's best for you, and we'll talk through that. And then sometimes there's a secondary one that can come up.
Perfect. And then how are photographers are what's the burden of proof? What do they have to show the government if they're going to apply for either a loan or for the PPP?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the PPP, again, that's the forgivable loan. The application just came out like yesterday, and it's a two-page application, and you have to prove basically nothing right now. But 60 days or so from now, we'll actually do half of it
Mm-hmm.
to documents that show how much you actually paid in rent, how much you actually paid in salary, that kind of thing. So there will be a burden of proof. So one of the things we want to get out to photographers is if you've not been keeping good records, it would really suck to lose out on free money because you don't keep good records for the next few months. That's really important. So that's a key thing. For the PPP, the EIDL, which is the Economic Impact Disaster Loan,
Okay.
those applications are much bigger and they do require more documents and more proof.
All right. So when you start talking about proof, one of the specific questions that our members had was, do I have to save all the cancellation emails from clients? So if there's a wedding photographer or an event photographer, and they're getting these emails saying I need to cancel, do they need to at some point use that to prove to the government that they've lost a couple $1,000s for not photographing an event?
Yeah, and one of the other questions was, maybe piggybacking on this. Hey, I had $10,000 worth of wedding sessions cancel. How do I get my $10,000 back? Like, where's my restitution from that? And I will say there's a lot of good news for photographers in the CARES Act, but you're not going to get the $10,000 from the government from a canceled job. It's just not the way the program would work. And if you think about it, like that would just be so ripe for abuse and be really hard to prove. So
Right.
I would say, like, by all means, keep those cancellation emails. I would not imagine that you need them to prove. And the reason I say that is because you're going to prove that you didn't have the income
Mm-hmm.
by sending your banker, here's my financial statements for the period in question. Like, here's my monthly financial statements showing that I didn't have the income. You don't need to also prove that it was because they canceled it.
Okay. So if photographers are paying themselves, or if they are not an LLC, what if they're just a sole proprietor? Are they able to apply for any of this, or should they just go the unemployment route?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And let's actually dive into unemployment for a minute if we could.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is the program that most photographers are going to benefit the most from is unemployment. And the reason is because I'm sure you've heard they expanded it. Self-employed people like sole proprietorships now can get it. The way most states work, like Missouri, where we're based, they take how much you made before when you had a job, they take half of it, and that's how much you get per week. It's capped at $320 in Missouri a week.
Okay.
And then the federal comes in and they pay $600. So in Missouri, you can make $920 a week, which isn't bad at all. So the way it works out is if you're a sole proprietorship and you make under about $40,000 a year, like that's your take home in a year, unemployment, you're actually going to make as much or more. So if you're a full-time photographer making 30,000, unemployment through the end of July, when that extra federal bonus piece is there, like you're actually going to be doing better. It's a great program for you. Now, some news on that though is none of the states are actually ready to handle this right now. Like I talked to our state's unemployment division,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the forms. Like literally, you apply online, and the fields do not exist for you to tell this information to them. Yeah. I mean, they were totally flat-footed, and everyone's sick in the government too, and so everyone's working from home. So it's going to be, they think, maybe a couple weeks before all of these self-employed people, like photographers, are going to even be able to apply. Now, the benefits will be retroactive back to when you, like, quote unquote lost your job, which I think for everyone is probably Monday because that's the first day after the bill passed. You probably can qualify.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another thing: if you are continuing to work, because like by all means, if you can still do some productive work, you should, as long as you're not endangering anybody. But you'll need to report that to your state. It might reduce the amount of benefits that you receive. So just be aware of that too. There's a reporting requirement that goes with this.
Got it. All right. Lois just popped in and wants to know um, if someone has been getting unemployment benefits and the benefits expired last month, can benefits be reopened um, and extended?
That's good. So what we learned from the state when we talked to them, and this just blows my mind, like unemployment is a state concept. Like states are the ones that administer unemployment plans, which means that every state has actually different rules. And so the person in Missouri was like, look, we're not ready to handle your claims because we're trying to work on a program to submit to the federal government for them to approve on how we in our state want to handle this. Every state's going to be different.
Got it.
So the expansion of duration of length that they did, it's going to depend on what state you're in, unfortunately.
Okay. And team, just so you're aware, I'm working on getting to interview someone from the unemployment department here in Minnesota. So hopefully we'll go through another round of this, but with someone from Minnesota. Um, okay, so in terms of CARES Act, how do I determine if my business even qualifies for that?
Yeah, so um, the unemployment expansion is part of the CARES Act. So when we're talking about the benefits from the CARES Act,
Mm-hmm.
like if you're getting unemployment as a photographer, you are benefiting from the CARES Act, no question. You are getting some of that money. Um, but as far as the other programs, we'll walk through those. One other thing I'll say with the unemployment, while the states don't know yet how they will calculate unemployment,
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind unemployment used to only be for employees. And it's really easy to say, here's how much I made as an employee so they can calculate what your benefits are. As you know, like it gets a lot harder when you're self-employed. How much did you actually make, right?
Right. This is
You know,
where
wait. Yeah.
this is where your bookkeeping comes in. so that you can go back to 2018 and 2019 and actually prove it out.
Yeah, and like I wouldn't want to be like I know they extended the due date for the tax returns,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not saying it's going to be required to get unemployment. I'm not saying that, but I'm also saying I wouldn't delay. I'd just go and get my 19 tax return filed so that you have that nice supporting document if your state chooses to require to prove your income.
So if you've got your books together, go ahead and push forward and do it.
Yeah.
And you're stuck at home anyway, so you may as well
Yeah.
get that stuff done.
We have used that on a few people like, hey, you got nothing else to do and we know it, so go and get your stuff together. It's good for you. Hey, can I jump on a mini soapbox too for just a second?
Yeah, go for it.
So one of the things we hear so often with photographers and other businesses, because this stuff it gets confusing, is the idea of I'm either an LLC or I'm a sole proprietorship.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of partnership, sole proprietorship, S corporation, C corporation, if you've heard those terms,
Mm-hmm.
those are tax concepts with the IRS. An LLC is actually a state by state legal protection concept. So like if you're going to be a sole proprietorship, heck, I'd be a LLC. I am one, right? For my business. I'm an LLC, so I get the legal protection. Now, my business was a sole proprietorship for a couple of years. Now it's an S corporation. That's an evolution we see a lot of photographers go through. As you become more successful, an S corporation can save you on taxes. But, and I think you actually had a couple of questions. Well, look, I'm not an LLC. I'm just a sole proprietorship. Do I qualify? Yes. Whether you're an LLC or your sole proprietorship, you now qualify for unemployment. By the way, if you were an S corporation in the past, technically you were supposed to be an employee and give yourself a W-2 and stuff. And if you've been doing that, you were already going to qualify for unemployment because you were already an employee. Now, the reason I mention this is if your cash is really tight, and you have to talk to Minnesota and see what they say about this. But here in Missouri, if they're saying you're not going to get anything for a couple weeks, we have one photographer who's an S corporation owner, and he said, look, I'll just fill it out based on my payroll. Maybe if I waited, I could claim a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm really looking for the $600 from the federal government. He went ahead and claimed it, got approved, and now he's getting like $700 a week coming his way.
Impressive.
So for him, that was better than waiting maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
Got it. All right. I'd also like to take an opportunity, team, if you're watching this live, there is a link to click on so that you can participate and ask questions. If you have questions, stick those into the comments so that we can get those answered for you. I do have like 3 sheets of things that people applied or sent in the other day. So we're going to try and get through as much as we can while we're on Jordan's calendar. It's a crazy busy time for accountants. So we've only got him for just a little bit. All right. Okay, so if you own a studio, if you're a photographer and you own a studio and you have employees, what is the best course of action right now? Is that to lay them off? Is that to furlough them? What has the greatest impact for getting money to your employees right now?
It's a great question. The good news for people is since the employment amount is higher, you can feel a lot better about laying your people off or furloughing them, which is just I'm laying you off, but I'm going to hire you back, right? You can feel a lot better about that than you could have before this because they're not going to be destitute because the feds are kicking in that extra $600 a week.
Okay.
So I know that's a major concern for a lot of employers, right? Like I don't want to hurt my employees. If I got to carry them so they can be okay, I will. You don't need to. Unemployment will kick in at a high amount. They'll be fine. The question is, in some cases, especially under $40,000 a year profit. Now, usually, if you got a couple employees, your profit's higher than that.
Mm-hmm.
We sure hope so. But in some cases, you should furlough your employees and you should go on unemployment yourself. Sometimes that is the answer.
Okay.
Lower profit companies, that makes a lot of sense.
And you touched on, you talked about amount of business per year, which leads me to something else that someone asked is, do I have to have a certain amount of business per year at all to qualify? And then how is the government going to determine how much money I'll actually get based on that?
Yeah, so one we saw made $9,000 last year. Now, full time, that was his job. He made $9,000 last year and he got approved for unemployment and he's getting unemployment now. But if you're thinking I do this as a side gig and I still work somewhere full time, you will not get unemployment. Which kind of thing, like usually you had a job, you made 30K, you do photography on the side, you make an extra 15K, you just lost the 15K, at least for a period here. We don't believe any state will probably give you unemployment. Again, state by state, you can check with your state, but I wouldn't count on it. Probably no is the answer there.
Okay. Um, Megan, you just mentioned that my audio is low. Is that I cranked it up a little bit? Is that any better? Okay. In the meantime, if someone's going to, and I think that you said this earlier, can they qualify for both an SBA loan and unemployment?
Yeah, you totally can.
Okay.
And let's talk through. So there's actually two SBA loans. The Paycheck Protection Program is an SBA loan. That's the two-pager forgivable loan. And then the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, that's a true loan. You're truly going to pay it back, but it's a 30-year loan at 3.75% interest. And so, like, the math on this is crazy. We ran it for one of our clients in our main brand, and if they got a $600,000 loan, this is a bigger business, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
3.75% for 30 years, their monthly payment is only $2,400. So it's not free money. And the PPP is what's kind of getting all the attention because it is truly potentially forgivable debt. In some cases, though, you're better off because you can maybe borrow more under that other loan program, and the payback period is just so long. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Who cares if you have to pay an extra $600 a month for the next 30 years if you get a huge chunk of money now? Maybe that's more helpful to you.
And then in that same situation, do you have to prove out what you're using that money for?
So, so for the EIDL, that's the one you don't pay, I mean, that's the one you do pay back. You don't get forgiven. You don't really have to prove what you use it for. The only stipulation is you cannot use it to refinance debt. Now, you can use it to make debt payments. So if you got a mortgage or something on your studio, you can make those payments from the money. You just can't refinance with it.
All right. Whoa, that popped up really big. Travis just asked, can you get a $10,000 grant through the EIDL? There's a website that is claiming you can.
Yeah, and that's legit. The way that works is, so if you apply for the EIDL, 10,000, and it could take maybe a couple weeks for that money to get to you. Depends on who you're going through. Like depends on a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But $10,000 of it you can get when we're hearing within 2 or 3 days, direct deposited to your account,
Whoa.
and it's truly a grant. Like it's an advance payment of the loan, but you don't have to pay it back typically.
Okay.
And again, I would say on every piece of this, guys, like terms and conditions apply, right? Like a lot of the 800 pages of the law is throwing a bunch of terms and conditions on this.
Okay. And then, how does this apply to gig? Does any of this apply to gig photographers? So if they are not necessarily full-time photographers, maybe they're just doing contractor work for other studios. How does this apply to them?
Yeah, it totally does. And you guys will qualify. So in that case, those people probably are a good fit for an unemployment claim and they are covered now by unemployment. That's probably the program that works best for them. Again, with the caveat of if you're doing this on the side as a gig and you still have your full-time job, you're probably not going to get unemployment benefits.
Okay. And then you can't use it. Are any of these items usable for anything other than um, studio expenses? So someone is telling me that you can't use it for lost revenue or living expenses, only studio expenses.
Yeah, I mean, so that's not quite. Let's talk through what exactly happens here for photographers. If you get that EIDL that you're going to have to pay back over 30 years, you can use that money for essentially anything other than refinancing debt. And essentially anything, I mean, hey, my studio got the loan. Let's say you got a $50,000 loan. You can pay yourself then. I mean, that's for you to eat. That's for you to live on, for you to pay your personal expenses with.
Mm-hmm.
You just are going to, depending on what kind of entity you are, if you're an S corp, you're going to pay yourself salary. You are a sole proprietorship. You can take draws out from that money. Now, the idea is you're going to get in trouble if you go out and buy a bass boat, right? Don't do that. But if you're using it for reasonable, like living expenses, like that's totally legit. That's actually part of the intention of this program. Keeps you from having to go on unemployment that way. which is also true of, let me dive into for a minute more into the PPP program, because that's its intention. It's the Paycheck Protection Program, keep people off unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
The way it works, and this is mainly more for our bigger studios if you've got employees, but it can also be really powerful if you're a sole proprietorship and you make really good money. Let's say you got a sole prop, they're the only shooter, no employees, they make $100,000
Mm-hmm.
profit. Okay. What you do is you take the amount up to $100,000 per person that you made for I'm sorry, I'm going to get technical here, but I want to say it the right way. It's for the period from March 1st, 2019 through February 29th, 2020. You take the total of the salary you paid yourself, the profit if you're a sole proprietorship, in this case, let's say you're a sole prop. By the way, if you make $100,000 as sole prop, I can save you like $6,000. Please become an S corp and talk to someone about that. But then you also have a bunch of contractors like hair and makeup, right? Maybe you have your initial cuts done by someone else. You get to count all those dollars. Let's say in total, what you profit and what you pay other people, you make $120,000 in that period of payments. Well, that's like $10,000 a month. The way the PPP works is you say it's a loan. It's truly a loan.
Mm-hmm.
You can borrow 2.5 times your average monthly for that period amount that you pay for these things. So the average, the total is 120, average per month is 10,000, 2.5 times that, you can borrow $25,000. That is a 2-year 0.5% interest, which is like nothing, right?
Right.
2-year 0.5% interest loan. You're going to have to pay it back.
Mm-hmm.
PPP, that's the first half. The second half is once you get the loan, an 8-week clock starts. And whatever you spend during that 8 weeks for rent, for utilities, including phone and internet, and for wages, you will get forgiven. That's what they're telling us now.
Okay.
So the idea is in this case, like, hey, I could, and I'm sorry, I'm walking deep into a scenario, but I know there's photographers listening who
No,
this
you're
is them,
fine.
right?
I totally know that they're listening.
Cool. So you're making 100,000, maybe it's even 60,000. Basically, if you're north of 40, that's your personal, what you used to taking. You've got these other people. You say, man, maybe I should furlough them and I should furlough me
Mm-hmm.
because then at least we're all getting something. In this case, you're probably better off getting the PPP loan,
Mm-hmm.
getting 25 grand, and then you can keep paying yourself your normal amount. You can't do bonuses or anything, but pay yourself your normal amount for that 8-week period. Well, that's a lot more than you're making on unemployment. 100 grand a year is a lot more than unemployment. So you're
Right.
keeping your living, the same it was. That's nice. And then you can pay your rent for those 2 months,
Mm-hmm.
and you can pay potentially some of these shooters and people. Or if you don't have any work for them, hey, let them be furloughed, or if they've got really their own companies, they're going to handle their end. But you end up borrowing 25,000, maybe you get 20,000 of it forgiven. For that 8-week period, you got your rent paid, your utilities paid, you paid yourself your normal amount. I'd save up some of that money, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got a $5,000 2-year 0.5% interest loan. It's a beautiful thing. It's helpful. Now, this is sort of thinking things will be back to where they were within a couple of months. That was the idea with this program when they passed the law. Who knows if that'll be true or not?
Megan wants to know if my studio is in my home, can I count all utilities to be forgiven or only a certain percentage?
That's a really good point. And I will say, and this is true for a lot of these things, they don't know. The calculations that will determine that do not currently exist, unfortunately. And again, one of the pieces of advice I know is you can wait until they clarify some of those things, but I wouldn't. I
Okay.
wouldn't wait potentially a few weeks waiting for them to decide how they're going to do these things. I would say, you know what, my utilities, well, in that case, your utilities, you don't even have to know if you can count them or not for 8 weeks. So in your case, if you're going to get the PPP loan, which is when utilities kind of matter, your loan is based on the amount you take home and you pay other people
Mm-hmm.
during that, average of the last 12 months times 2.5. So utilities don't even come into it until the 8-week period. And it's really, you get to the end of that 8-week period. So there's going to be a lot of people scrambling during then to figure out how they want to handle this stuff.
Right.
And at the end of it, you're going to go talk to your bank and figure out what gets forgiven. Just know you might not be able to forgive the utility part, but that's okay. It's a 2-year 0.5% note. You can pay it back if you need to.
All right. Becky just asked, I missed which route you recommended going for a studio photographer with no employees. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so studio photographer with no employees who makes under $40,000 a year profit,
Mm-hmm.
like your total take home, go with unemployment, generally speaking. Studio employee, even if you've got no employees, if you've got yourself, if you make high income, 70, 80, 90,000, look at a PPP loan. It might be a better route for you.
Perfect. I think we nailed that for Megan.
Cool.
Someone else just asked, what's the government counting as income? Do we know that yet?
For purposes of like a PPP loan
Y-
or,
yes.
yeah, so we don't exactly. I will say the CPA community thinks that for purposes of this, like if you're sole proprietorship,
Mm-hmm.
take your prior year tax return, um, look at your books for March 2019 through February 2020, look at your profit during that period,
Mm-hmm.
and that if you're sole proprietorship, that's your take home, that's what you count. If you're an S corp, it's a lot easier. Your S corp, look at your pay stub, right? That you're because you're required to be on payroll if you're an S corp. So look at your pay stub. That's the amount for unemployment, and for the PPP purposes, that's the amount of salary you're paying plus anyone else you're paying. And the interesting thing is, for purposes of most of these programs, like for the PPP, when I say it's basically your average for the last 12 months times 2.5 of your salary, it's actually salary plus amounts you pay for contractors, which
Okay.
is good for photographers because like hair and makeup, like those are almost never employees. You still get those dollar amounts, and they can really bump up the amount that you get and the amount you get forgiven.
Or second shooters or anything like that.
For
Like,
sure.
yeah. Um, Lynn wants to know, I lost 3 yearly annual jobs that are canceled and not rescheduled.
Mm.
It sounds like Lynn is an event photographer. The loss was around $10,000 in net income. Can I get help with that? What's the best way to get help with that?
Yeah, and that sucks. And that's yeah, it's really unfortunate. The way you get help with it is there's no direct help that says, "Hey, I lost this much, so I'm going to get some benefit."
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to go through the same calculations everyone else is, right? Should I get unemployment? Should I get the PPP? And by the way, the PPP is nice because it's forgiven. The EIDL, the economic injury loan that you have to pay back over 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
we are mainly seeing that benefit people who are like really big. So if you're a photographer and you've got like a chain, like a small chain or something, you got 5 or 6 people working from you, you're doing something bigger in that kind of space,
Mm-hmm.
and you say, man, I could use like a couple $100,000 loan more than I could use like a $30,000 or $40,000 grant.
Mm-hmm.
That's who that applies to typically. So we don't see very many photographers going for a long-term loan because for most photographers, like maybe you qualify for 20,000. Yeah, but what are you going to do with a $20,000 loan? Yeah, the monthly payments are really small, so that's good. But unemployment's probably more beneficial to you
Okay.
if you're small like that.
Hey, Julianne, I see that you're asking about gross income or net. Can you clarify what you like? Can you just clarify that for us a little bit? Becky um, wants to know, do you recommend filing for unemployment right now? Um, I'll let you go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, when I talked this photographer through it, who was like, "Look, I'm an S corp. I only paid myself $9,000 on payroll last year, but I took out like another 30,000. Do I get account 9 or just a 30?" And I said, in our state, they're set up to handle the 9. You could wait a few weeks and probably get a higher amount because you might be able to count that 30,000.
Mm-hmm.
Might not. We don't know. Do you want bird in the hand or two in the bush? And he said, look, I'm just going to go ahead and apply for it now. Because here's why. The math really matters here. In Missouri, the most you can make is $320 a week from Missouri, and then $600 federal.
Okay.
So in his case, he ended up getting like $100 Missouri and $600 federal. That's $700. Maybe he could have gotten $800 or $900 had he waited and waited to, for them to sort out their stuff to handle that.
Mm-hmm.
But that to me wasn't the best call. He made the right call. Go ahead and apply as he qualifies. And it'll be interesting to hear what Minnesota is.
And Becky, I don't know if Minnesota is set up just yet to start taking unemployment from self-employed um, people like ourselves. I know that someone was talking the other day about they're somewhat set up, and you are only allowed to apply if your last name begins with a certain letter, or your social security number starts with
Oh, wow.
this, or like there's, yeah, I think we're just in a waiting pattern right now to figure that portion out.
But here's the if you are self-employed and you're going to try to apply to your state, you're going to have somehow, the $600 is $600 from the feds. That's easy. But your state is going to want to calculate how much benefits you qualify for.
Okay.
How are they going to do that? I think they're going to look at your books and records, maybe look at your tax return. Don't say, I'll just wait a week or whatever until we find out if it's ready. Like, use the week to get all your stuff in order. That's what we're advising people.
That's a great tip. Absolutely fantastic. Um, and then Julianne says, when he refers to your income, is he referring to gross or net for all options?
Yeah, okay, so let's talk through. If you are if you're going the unemployment route, they're going to look at we believe, again, none of these calculations currently exist, but what they've told us is they're going to look at your net income. So that's your net, your bottom line, your profit, okay?
Okay.
If you're looking at a PPP loan and you're self-employed, same thing. They're going to look at your net income to determine how much your salary equivalent was for figuring out how much loan you get and then how much you should get forgiven as well. And then if you're getting an EIDL loan, it's kind of a moot point for that. So it's really the net number that matters. It does not really matter your gross.
All right. Julianne, did that answer your question? And then Becky, you just said you're in Wisconsin. I have no idea if Wisconsin's set up to respond or react to anything unemployment related for us yet either. I haven't heard. Nate Peterson might be a really awesome resource for that. And then Annie Marie, this is fairly long. I'm going to read it from paper, so I apologize. I'm not ignoring you. There was a link in another group with an application which they said was for the CARES Act, but it was actually from the SBA. I questioned the link as I didn't think that the CARES Act had finalized yet and wasn't through the SBA. I know we can only get one loan, so didn't want to act on that one as I felt it wasn't the correct one or the correct link. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's just a good question. So the PPP loan and the EIDL loan are both through the SBA. So that's not a fake thing. They're both a little different. The EIDL loan, which is the longer application, again, you pay this one back. There's an online application, and that's how you start it. The PPP loan, you go through a local bank, and they have a 2-page application, and you go through a bank. So they're both SBA loans. You probably got an EIDL loan sent.
Mm-hmm.
That one's been around for longer. EIDL loan actually came out, and it's been around long before the CARES Act. And so that's the one, if you heard about a loan in the last month or two, it has the $10,000 grant, you have to repay it. It's pre-CARES. To me, it's kind of a moot point, like, am I getting a CARES program or not? Like, it's all related to the coronavirus. The EIDL is, technically, the PPP is the program that is included in the 800-page CARES Act. But, some cases, one program is better than the other one.
Got it. And then, all right, this doesn't really, Jordan, this doesn't apply to you necessarily, but Jennifer, I wanted to toss this up on the screen for my good friend Becky. Jennifer says that, yes, I've heard that the system is completely overloaded with applications right now. They want people to apply on a specific day of the week by the last numbers in your social security number.
Interesting.
Okay, I'm going to keep going with questions if that's okay with you.
Go for it, yeah.
If I understand, Megan wants to know, if I understand things correctly, there are 3 options right now for small businesses in Minnesota. There's the PPP grant through a lender, an EIDL advance, and an EIDL loan. Which of these works best for an LLC with only one employee, which is herself? Can she do multiple, and then are they forgiven over time?
Yeah, so the question, the key piece of information, maybe the most important piece, is if you're sole proprietorship, what is your net? So let's run through it. If your net is under 40,000, unemployment's going to be your best bet.
Got it.
If your net from your business is over 40,000, it's when you should start looking at either a PPP forgivable loan, And again, that one is forgivable. Doesn't mean it's automatically forgiven. Like, let's make sure we're clear. It means it's possibly forgiven. You have to go through all the hoops and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you, but it could be a good option if you're high income sole proprietorship and you got no other employees. Like PPP, in some cases you're taking home close to twice what you would on unemployment, so that could be a better option. EIDL, again, I'm mainly seeing that for significantly larger businesses where that makes sense, with the caveat you can get unemployment and also qualify for an EIDL. So here's a strategy I'll throw out. In your case, like maybe you made $30,000 last year, so unemployment's the way to go. Good. You locked in unemployment, you're doing well. Through the end of July, you're making as much or more than you made for your photography studio. And by the way, if you're doing that and you're bunkered down in your house, I hope all of you are doing crazy amounts of social media planning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like getting your back office in order, figuring out all that kind of stuff. Like use this season, it's a gift.
You're right. Gift of time. We've heard that over and
Yeah,
over.
it really is.
Yeah.
So, but maybe you get unemployment, and if you're on unemployment, the PPP is no benefit to you because you only get the loan forgiven to the extent you have like payroll. You can't double dip and be on unemployment and also get anything really forgiven on the PPP. Like maybe a tiny bit of your rent or something maybe could be forgiven, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say unemployment plus EIDL. Now EIDL is a hassle. EIDL is a longer loan application. It's a hassle, but there's no fees. That's
Right.
important to note because EIDL has a $10,000 grant piece to it. So if I'm you and I'm making $30,000, I'm getting unemployment. I'm going to go through and, it's going to be a little bit painful, but it's worth it. I'd apply for an EIDL loan. Maybe you get a 10, 20, $30,000 loan and you get 10,000 of it hopefully as a grant, which you get quickly and forgiven grant.
Got
So
it.
that way you get $10,000 extra cash. And also with those loans, you can prepay them. There's no prepay. So if you want to prepay it before the 30 years, you can.
Oh,
So when we're talking about smaller things, that $10,000 grant becomes significant.
that's awesome. Megan, I hope that that answers your question. If you are watching live right now, please just give me a thumbs up or some sort of something so that we know we got you covered. And then if I make over the $40,000, am I guaranteed the PPP loan? If I don't get it, then can I sign up for unemployment? Should I sign up for both now and just see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, some good ideas there. PPP can't be processed until this Friday. That's when the gates open wide for processing it. The government says it'll take just a few days to process those loans. The banks are all telling us it'll be 2 or 3 weeks. So unfortunately, with the PPP, you might not find out for a couple weeks. Here's the thing, they're being very, very generous in who they're giving these loans to.
Okay.
So if you've got, and you can read about this stuff, it's plain English-ish.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have just started your business. If you're doing $5,000 a year gross, like probably PPP is not going to make any sense for you. But if you kind of walk through that, like I'm not worried so much about people not getting the PPP. I'm worried about maybe not getting forgiven on the PPP.
Got
That's
it.
where you got to do the math and say, like, look, I get the PPP loan, but I only get it forgiven if I continue to pay people payroll or if I myself and my business have profit, which kind of takes the place of payroll for the owner. Here's the thing, you get a PPP loan, right? You have no profit for the next 2 months. You don't hire any contractors because there's no work to do. You have no employees. What are you going to get forgiven? Maybe the rent on your studio and the utilities, but like that's not very much. You'd be
Right.
better off getting a $10,000 grant from EIDL and getting unemployment.
Those are some good thoughts.
Yeah.
Megan, does that help you out? All right. Nate wants to know if everything for the CARES Act is that federal? Is that across all states? He's in Wisconsin, so he is concerned that maybe things are different. If things from today's webinar are maybe not applicable to him.
Yeah, great question. So unemployment does vary state by state, but everyone qualifies for the $600 federal. That is a nationwide level. PPP and EIDL, they're both through the Small Business Administration, which is federal, and the CARES Act is federal. So it doesn't matter which state you're in. I will throw out there too, some states, like I know Florida has this, they have some special programs. I haven't seen any of those special programs that really hold a candle to the federal ones, but your state might have some other benefits and bonuses and stuff. It wouldn't hurt to look at.
Okay. And I am certain that we've covered this, but there are some of these questions that I'm going over a second time just to ensure
Sure.
that we're answering specifically to what their questions are and getting them covered. How do things differ between sole proprietor LLCs versus S corps? My wife and I both draw a salary from our businesses. Should we file for unemployment or file for an SBA loan or both? Does all work need to cease in order for that to work if they're going to draw unemployment? And are there long-term repercussions?
Yeah, so those are all really good questions. Let me tackle first the easy parts.
Okay.
If you get unemployment, what are the long-term repercussions? So this is, I'm assuming you're S corporations, because if you're saying you're drawing a salary, that sounds like you're an S corporation. But if that's true, then you are currently paying into the unemployment system. And unemployment is actually a form of insurance. It's a mandatory insurance administered through the government. A lot of people don't understand that. And so just like if you make your car insurance, your rates will probably go up a little bit. So if you're an S corporation and you do claim unemployment, your rates might go up a little bit. I've heard some people worry about that. We're talking negligible amounts here, people. Do not worry about that. Maybe $100 a year, maybe. So don't worry about that piece of it. Long-term repercussions, I'm not worried about that for you guys. Long-term, like, is it going to hurt your credit score? No. 3.6 million Americans went on unemployment last month. Like, it's not a thing that you need to be worried about from that perspective. You really do get to decide what's best for me in the short term. Where do I get the most money from? Would you read some of those questions too? There's a bit of a long one.
How do things differ between sole proprietor LLCs
Mm,
versus S corps? My wife and I both draw salary from our business. Should we file for unemployment or file for an SBA loan or both?
yeah.
Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Let me pause you there for a
Yep.
second if I
Yep.
could, because that way I make sure I get all the parts answered. In that case, it does not matter whether you are a sole proprietorship or an S corporation for determining which program is best for you. Nearly as much, what really drives it is how much net income you have. If you're a sole proprietorship, how much you paid yourself in salary if you are an S corporation, because that's what drives all these programs. That's what they're based on.
Okay. Um, I think the next important portion to that is, does all work need to cease? If they're going to file for unemployment, do they need to stop like editing and stop producing work, stop doing sales sessions, stop? Because a lot of photographers have gone to in-person sales, but via the web or via Zoom or something now. So some are still taking in money.
For sure. Here's what we think will happen. And again, this is one of those things that the states do not have, I don't think any state has figured quite out yet.
Mm-hmm.
If you are employed, so what we do know is if you work for someone and they say, hey, we're having to lay you off, you went from 40 hours a week to 0 hours a week, you now go on unemployment, you file, they calculate your benefits. If the next week your employer says, hey, you know what? I've got 10 hours worth of work for you. You go and you do the 10 hours worth of work, you report it to your state, it decreases the amount of benefits you get. So I think, yes, I think if you're working and earning income, it will decrease the benefits you get. The thing I don't know is, what if you don't earn any income? Excuse me, what if you're working on your social media, have 0 income? Does that decrease your benefits? We're not sure.
Okay. While you grab a drink, I'm going to ask the next question. All right. All right, team, now's a good time. If you've got extra questions, we've been on with Jordan for about 45 minutes, so I'm super appreciative that he has been able to take this time with us and get all your questions answered. If we're going to wrap up here shortly, but if you've got extra questions or if you've got something that is dire and you want it answered, please put it in the comment section, and we're going to roll through for maybe just another couple of minutes so that we can let him get on with the rest of his day. I've got 2 questions in queue to ask him, and then I can take anything else from comments. So if you've got questions, please get them in there. Welcome back.
Yeah, I promise that is allergies, not coronavirus.
We're glad that you're healthy.
Thanks.
Okay, I've got 2 in queue to ask you, and then if I don't get any more, we'll wrap up. We've been on for about 45 minutes. We crazy appreciate your time. Is it best to keep paying employees and hope that CARE Act will help fund that, or is it best to furlough and file for unemployment?
And again, it's going to depend a little bit on your numbers. So let me run both scenarios for you.
Okay.
If you have nothing for your employees to do, nothing really productive for them to do, and you are lower income, you're making 30,000 anyway, so unemployment's actually the better option for you. Everyone gets furloughed, everyone goes on unemployment. That's my recommendation.
Okay.
If you're making $100,000 a year, and the numbers, again, you kind of got to crunch the numbers a little bit. I hate to have to say that, but it's kind of true. There are some scenarios where you could basically have your people work for free for 2 months, and like if you could find something productive for them to do, like it'd be a great time to keep them on payroll, keep them doing something, get that benefit.
Okay. Lynn wants to know, if I work a part-time job right now, helping a small business, does that affect unemployment?
It will decrease your unemployment benefits, yes.
Okay. Mac Magoon Portraits would like to know, it was just mentioned that some photographers are still working, and I was under the impression that our studio should stay closed to the public. That really doesn't apply to what we're talking about. If you've got a shelter-in-place order, you probably shouldn't be going to your studio and dealing with the general public. You should probably only be going to get paperwork done or get your books done or clean the studio. I don't think that you're supposed to be having interactions with general public.
For sure.
Megan wants to know, do you have to be in business a certain amount of years to qualify for the PPP?
You do, not years. It's like months, and I apologize. Like I think it's like 2 months or 3 months. Like you had to have been in business before the beginning of 2020 or February 2020, something like that. But if you've been in business a year or more, you're definitely good.
Okay. And then Becky wants to know, is there a difference between filing for federal unemployment versus standard unemployment?
So it's actually all the unemployment is through your state. So you'll just Google your state and unemployment, and they administer it, and you register with them, and then the federal comes in through that.
Okay.
So just one system.
All right. Those are all of the questions that I have. Thank you so
Cool.
much for your time.
Absolutely.
If for some reason someone's got some extra questions or they need to reach out to you for anything, where can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. CPA for photographers, if you guys want to start there, it's a good place. It's our website. You have contact information. We're doing just all the time. If you want to book a 15-minute session with Emma, she's our onboarding specialist. So if you're interested in kind of working with us, if you've got more of a sales tax specific question, route that over to me. Email information. There's a form on the website. All that stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I just threw up the graphic that talks about wanting to chat. Let's see here. Sorry, team. I'm working to get my screen back. All right, team. So that you know, we are going to repurpose this video. It will hit the public-facing page for TCPPA probably within an hour. It's going to take me some time to download it and re-upload it. So if you have other friends from other states that would like to see this, it'll hit the Facebook page shortly, and it'll also hit the TCPPA YouTube channel. Again, Jordan, thank you so much for your time, and I will put that graphic up one more time. If you need more time with Andrew, this is the best place to get in touch. Thanks so much,
Sounds
team.
good. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.